The year is 2007. My father makes his commute to Atlanta, Georgia every day for his job while I grew up and throughout my teenage years. One day he comes home and tells my brother and I about some kind of weird international cultural festival thing happening in downtown Atlanta that is supposed to have a parade going through the city full of people dressed up as pop culture characters such as from Star Wars. The event was called Dragon Con, and we had no idea what to expect, but we decided to go to the event that Saturday to see what it was all about. After passing through lots of large crowds of people, we enter into the Hyatt Regency Hotel and see the massive Dragon Con banner, and next to it was a guy dressed as Boba Fett from Star Wars. But not just some Halloween costume, this guy was straight off the set, detail for detail, film accurate, and we were quite impressed. We later found out we needed to find the registration line and acquire badges to get into this event properly, which resulted in us being in a line for over 4 hours. After that excruciatingly long wait, DragonCon would go on to be an experience that would change my life forever. I want to clarify up front that this video isn't going to be a high-level overview of the basic concept of what cosplay is for the normies watching. Like, I'm not going to be citing the Webster's Dictionary on the word cosplay or referencing a bunch of mainstream documentaries that would air on broadcast television. If you're completely alien to the subject matter, you can check out 4 Days at DragonCon on pba.org, but this video is primarily geared towards people that understand what cosplay is, at least in concept. This video is made up of a lot of subjective opinions based on personal experiences that myself and other collaborators share, and I interviewed numerous cosplayers to get their insight and experiences as well. This video also gets into some socio-cultural as well as political elements, with a general left-leaning bias, but if you can't handle such biting commentary as trans people exist, or you shouldn't be rude to people with disabilities, then you should probably go ahead and click off the video now regardless, as I don't really care to have your engagement. Also, any and all convention footage shown in this video has been recorded personally by me over the years, with 1 or 2 exceptions that will be credited, as well as proper accreditation for any and all collaborators. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into it. I've been sitting on this video idea for a while now, and with conventions finally starting to come back after COVID, I figured now would be a good time to cover this. I see a lot of people asking questions like what they need to know before they go to their first con, and I wanted to unpack some of the misconceptions and exaggerations I see when people give their answers. I see a lot of helpful answers, but also a lot of answers I would classify as lowest common denominator answers, a lot of trite overstated comments such as make sure to shower and wear deodorant that are so self-evident they'll actually just fall on the deaf ears of people that need to hear it. Cosplayer and convention goer etiquette has been a topic of heavy discussion in recent years, but I wanted to go a little bit further and talk about some of the aspects of going to a convention that are not often discussed, like some of the weird social quirks and cultural manifestations of this weird hobby we all love to do. Let's get one thing straight right off the bat. Cosplaying is weird. It's a strange hobby that exists downstream from fashion and craft hobbies, but also from tabletop gaming, role-playing, theater, and performance art. It's also this performatively social thing where we literally wear our niche interests on our sleeve to signal to other nerds that we're into the same weird nerdy thing that they are. You also kind of have to make peace with and accept the idea that cosplay in and of itself is a kind of vain and selfish hobby. Now, you yourself may not be a vain or selfish person, but the idea, like philosophically, of creating something with the express purpose of basking in the respect and admiration of others, specifically to get attention, is kind of self-serving. It doesn't make it ethically wrong or even problematic, it's just something that kind of needs to be reconciled with as part of getting into it. It attracts a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons, but at the end of the day, we all have a lot more in common than we don't. We all found this hobby out of the same core desire to connect with other nerds and express our nerdiness socially. Cosplaying has always been a haven for people that have felt socially cast out. I don't say that as a derogatory thing or as an outsider looking in. I would know. When I call us nerds and weirdos, I'm saying that because I'm one of you, and I wouldn't have you any other way. You're exactly the type of people I like to keep in my company. Conventions exist as the perfect place for us to meet other like-minded people free of judgment and condescension, and allows us to expand our social circle and make more friends. In spite of this, I've seen a lot of people saying that they go to a convention and they fail to find their source of fun. for whatever reason, usually related to social anxiety and interactions that didn't go the way they intended, or introversion. If this applies to you, trust me, you're not alone in this. But I think the difference between two people with social anxiety, where one of them has a good time and the other one does not, may come down to their individual choices of how they spend their time and their attitude towards attending the convention. I've been cosplaying and going to conventions now for more than 15 years, and I've probably been to more than 100 different events when you include repeat visits to the same con every year. I'm also a weird example of a nerd extrovert who is neurotypical, so I understand that there's going to be certain social situations that are going to be easier for me than for other people where that isn't the case. I promise you it wasn't always that way though. My social skills are a learned behavior I developed over my professional career and just part of years of exposure to other people via conventions. Basically, I've had a lot of practice on how not to be socially awkward, but I promise you, no one is immune to it, and I have embarrassed myself in ways that I still cringe about to this day, trust me. So we're at the venue for Anime Weekend Atlanta 2023, and this is the final year that it's going to be in this venue. They just announced, well, we knew the contract was ending, we knew they were changing venues, but they just officially announced yesterday where they're going and when, and it's very bittersweet. I'm not ready to say goodbye to this venue yet, because this is where it's been for more than 20 years, and where I've been going to it since at least 2007, and it is kind of unfortunate, but it's like, you know, the convention can't be inexorably tied to one venue forever, especially when things change around the local area and, you know, different real estate developments and things like that. So it was kind of inevitable, but it is going to make this year feel very different, and I'm just not quite sure how I feel about it yet. The first thing I want to say to any convention goer is there's no right or wrong way to spend your time at a convention. If you go to a convention to only do like one specific thing, then that's your business and I'm not here to judge. But if you found yourself feeling unfulfilled at a convention, then the biggest advice I can give you is get your money's worth out of your badge. There are so many different things to do, and if you're the kind of person that just spends all day in the game room playing games by yourself, or if you're somebody that shows up only for the rave, then try going to a panel on one of your franchises that you're really passionate about. Try going to a workshop and learning a new skill and a new way to engage with one of your favorite hobbies. Lots of conventions have concerts at them that are completely free as long as you have a badge. You don't even have to pay extra for a ticket. I hear this comment a lot, which is, I want to go to the convention, but I don't have a cosplay. You absolutely do not need a cosplay for your first convention. In fact, I don't think I would even recommend one. Cosplays can be hot, uncomfortable, heavy, and cumbersome. Why limit your first experience with those restrictions? Those are things you're going to have to overcome eventually, of course, but why ruin your first experience with that? You may think to yourself, oh, talking to cosplayers without a cosplay on is awkward, and if I had a cosplay on like they did, I would fit in better. I can relate to this sentiment because there are times where I will see somebody in cosplay and I'm not wearing my cosplay and I hesitate to approach them, and then times where I'm wearing a cosplay from the same series as what they're wearing, and it creates this sort of natural icebreaker where you can engage in the conversation a lot more easily because there's already this established familiarity with each other based on that alone. But if you're worried about coming across as awkward or creepy for hanging around cosplayers and you're not in cosplay, that perception does not come from whether or not you're wearing a cosplay or not. It may come from some negative experiences that cosplayer's had in the past. And you have to remember that they are also nerds with social anxiety as well. So don't take it personally if a conversation starts off awkward when talking to somebody. The two most important things I can say about cosplay, the most important things if you take away anything from this video, are these two things right here. Number one, cosplayers are not performers. They're people just like you who also are prone to social anxiety and embarrassment. And two, people cosplay for different reasons. There are people who derive enjoyment from cosplaying in different ways and have different goals in mind they're trying to accomplish with engaging in it. And they get a different payoff out of doing it than other people do as well. All of which are correct, by the way. There is no right and wrong way to cosplay. Let's talk about that first point for a little bit here. So I'm sure by now you've heard the term cosplay is not consent, as it gets said A lot. Almost to the point where it falls into that category I mentioned earlier of things that should be self-evident, but there is some nuance in this that needs to be discussed. Just because someone is wearing a cosplay and getting a lot of pictures taken of them is not an invitation to invade their personal space or to touch them. Cosplayers are not their characters. Do not expect someone to act as though their character would all of the time like they're a performer. This sort of unspoken performance angle comes up a lot in cosplay because when people see you in the cosplay, they immediately associate you with whatever they associate with the character. To give some examples of this, I'm sure anyone who's attended a convention from 2008 until now has probably heard an Edward Elric freak out over being called short, or a Death the Kid freak out over being called asymmetrical. These little things might be funny at first, but they become incredibly tiresome and unfunny at the end of the day. Cosplayers don't owe you that performance, so don't get upset when they don't act the way that their character would. There's also the flip side of it, which is what happens when someone gets a little too in character in cosplay and uses that as a scapegoat for their behavior when they start acting like an actual jerk and being really rude and disrespectful to people. Ask me about the story of the guy who took role-playing as a vampire just a little bit too seriously when me and my wife were walking back to our hotel after one con. In addition, just because someone has chosen a fictional character to cosplay as does not mean that they, without question, believe in all of the morals and values stated by that fictional character. Fictional characters aren't real. You're allowed to cosplay as villains or morally gray characters without believing in all the stated values of that character. I'll never forget our first Fire Emblem photo shoot after Three Houses came out, so this was late 2019. Somebody shouted out to one of the characters, calling them the CEO of racism, and I didn't know what the context was of that, so I thought that was a pretty unfunny and inflammatory thing to say to somebody without context. Like, that's the kind of thing that makes you sound like a terminally online weirdo who thinks that real life is Twitter and hasn't spoken to a real person before, and not the fact that you're doing it without a cosplay on. One of my cosplay friends was telling me this story of literally last year where this Persona 5 Joker cosplayer came up to her and just randomly, while she was in the dealer's room, just pointed his like prop gun at her, and she was like, she thought he was being in character or whatever, or that he didn't like her character and was trying to like signal that. And so she kind of turns around and is being like playful at first, but he doesn't say anything, and she's like, do you need something? Can I help you? And the whole interaction was just super awkward, and the guy just walks away. And it's like, man, you can't do that. You gotta be careful with people. Like, it's a very thin line between like playing around and acting in character and like threatening somebody, you know. And then literally this year, you know, we're in the middle of doing the Tide Moon photo shoot, the Fate photo shoot, and we're like partially taking up a staircase, but we're leaving enough room for everybody to pass by. And this Persona 5 Joker cosplayer comes down the stairs and stops like halfway down the stairs behind us, and you could tell he was trying to pass through the area, but he sees us and he starts like goofing off in the background, and we eventually have to yell at him, be like, please move on, we're trying to do a photo shoot for a different group, you know, we didn't you don't belong here, kind of thing. And he like fumbles over his stuff and like jumps down the last couple of stairs, trying to be like epic or whatever, and it was so cringy. And I'm like, what is his problem? Like, he has no social awareness of his situation, and it's like just another example of like, don't act out in character like that to where it's going to get you in trouble. I'm almost certain it was the same person as her anecdote, but I'm just like, I don't even really think that's like being in character for that character. It was just the weirdest thing. But yeah, don't do stuff like that.
I want to say it was 2011 or 12. I don't remember exactly which one. It was back when Hetalia was in the height of its popularity. And I was there, and then someone cosplaying America decided to try to pick a fight with me. I don't know if it's because of the costume I was wearing at the time or what, but they just decided that they wanted to fight me specifically, and it got a little bit crazy.
How you interact with cosplayers goes hand in hand with how you interact with the convention space itself. Keep safety in mind and don't stop people for photos in the middle of a crowded walkway where you're blocking the flow of traffic. Don't stop somebody for pictures in the middle of, let's say, the registration line. or in the middle of the crowded artist alley when people are shoulder to shoulder trying to shop. Also, if a cosplayer has disassembled large parts of their cosplay to rest or to eat, they most definitely do not want to reassemble it to take your picture.
Be respectful of everyone around you, whether that means saying like, excuse me or pardon me if you're in like the con hall because it gets really crowded and you just want to get around somebody. Don't be afraid to speak up and say, hey, can I go around you? I know a lot of people are introverts, and especially in the culture that cons attract is introverted, very socially awkward. It's okay to ask for somebody to move or to like just shuffle over a little bit.
People may refuse to have their picture taken for any number of reasons, and the one thing you need to remember about this is that 9 out of 10 times it's nothing personal. It could be either that they are late to something, or their cosplay is damaged or falling apart and in some kind of compromised state where they don't want it photographed in that condition. We all make cosplay because we want to get our pictures taken, so don't take it personally if somebody refuses. They probably have a good reason for it, and chances are you'll see them again later in the convention anyway and can ask them again. One thing you need to remember about large and bulky cosplays is that sometimes the person inside of it cannot see. They cannot tell how much larger they are than you and if you're in the way. You need to make space for these people and allow them to move through the venue. The same needs to be said about handicap accessibility at conventions. If you see somebody in a mobility device or a wheelchair, you absolutely need to make space for these people, including giving up your spot in a line for a panel, letting somebody sit at the front of a panel, getting out of the elevator so that somebody can get in an elevator with one of these things, or even just allowing them space to get to the front of a booth in the dealer's room or the artist alley as people constantly cut in front of them all the time. DragonCon has a particularly robust disability services department, and they're quite proud of it, and it really shows. But not all conventions are created equal as far as that goes. Also, and I can't believe this even needs to be said, but please be polite and respectful to the convention staff. 9 out of 10 times they are unpaid volunteers who are giving up their free time to be there. And by purchasing your badge, you consented to the terms of service of the con, and you can have your badge revoked for bad behavior. Culturally, we've come a long way with this next point, but there are still some people that lack the social literacy to navigate these situations, or are just being plain rude on purpose. Do not comment on the appearance of someone's body while they're in cosplay. People should not be limited to cosplay characters that match their body type. Most fictional characters don't look like real people anyway, so it's all completely arbitrary, but do not comment if you don't think someone is the correct height, musculature, weight, age, or race for their character. It's very inappropriate. Culturally, we've developed a shorthand for this called Cosplay is for Everyone, but body positivity should be something that someone comes to the community and expects out of it.
Some cosplayers or even non-cosplayers believe that when cosplaying, you need the same body type, skin color, sometimes even athletic. I mean, it's none of that matters, as long as you're comfortable. And I would say keep some sort of respect with the character.
As someone who got really out of shape during COVID, I can say for sure that there are old cosplays that don't fit me anymore, and sometimes it does make me feel insecure as well. And if I had someone that told me that I was too fat to be a particular character, I would probably tell them to go fuck themselves and that I don't remember asking. And when you see a person of color cosplaying a character that is not traditionally of that race, don't say something like, oh, it's the X version of that character. Like, don't say it's the black version of the character, or whatever race or ethnicity they happen to be. Because I can tell you, and I don't speak for people of color when I say this, but they're not trying to be an alternate version of the character. They're just trying to be the character. So don't call attention to their skin color like that. Now, there is a newer phenomenon that cosplayers of color have embraced where they will actually modify elements of the character to add a sort of ethnic spin on it. And I think that's rad as hell, and I love to see more of it. But it is never required, and is simply a stylistic choice that a lot of people have chosen to embrace.
You understand that telling me my cosplay is inaccurate simply because of the color of my skin is wrong. You understand that. There are plenty of people who don't understand that. And so the thing that I would like to point out as, a woman and a brown person is that cosplay is a hobby. It's about having fun. And it's about dressing up as a fictional character. The character does not exist. They never have, never will. Therefore, if you choose to dress up as somebody that is outside of your ethnicity, go for it. And if someone comes up to you and is like, this character isn't brown, this character isn't black, this character isn't, and in some cases, this character isn't white, remember that the character is fictional. So if you're dressing up to dress up and have fun, then you should be allowed to do so. That being said, do not use your makeup to match skin tone, because I swear, someone will be offended, rightly so, and you will get hate for it. And if you do get hate for it, be humble and apologize. Don't try to hide behind "I didn't know," because we're in 2023 and that's not an excuse.
Finally, if you're a non-cosplaying con goer, do not comment on what you think the quality of somebody's cosplay is. You have to understand that you have absolutely no right to do this. You don't understand what goes into making cosplay. I've seen this happen before where I'll see somebody gathering up a group of people who are hanging out to take a picture of them, and they may single out the one person they want the picture of because they like that cosplay, or they may single out somebody who they think doesn't look good enough. I can't overstate how this is an unbelievably dickish thing to do, and it's disastrous to somebody's self-esteem. It is reasonable to assume that a non-cosplaying con-goer who has never cosplayed themselves does not know what goes into making cosplay, and thus doesn't understand these little nuanced situations from the inside until they've done it themselves. So when it comes to getting into cosplay, I'm sure after your first convention it can be overwhelming, and I'm sure you have a lot of lofty ideas in your head of cool things that you want to make, but you don't know how. What I'm about to say is the most genuine advice I can give to anybody getting into a new hobby for the first time. Be humble. Generally, if you are asking questions, expressing curiosity, and showing gratitude towards the people who are answering those questions and helping you, you'll be fine. Cosplayers, like any hobby enjoyers, want more people to enjoy their hobby with, so it's in their best interest to help you get into it by sharing what they know and expressing their skills. As I said before, there's absolutely no right or wrong way to cosplay. You can absolutely go out and buy a pre-made cosplay online just to get started. You're not technically required to learn how to make anything at all if it doesn't interest you. Just don't go around claiming you're God's gift to cosplay in your pre-made outfit, and especially don't go comparing yourself to people who have made their stuff. I see this happen a lot when people first get into a hobby and start socializing with the other people that enjoy this hobby. They will fake confidence in order to disguise their insecurity, but it just comes across as arrogant, and people who have been in the hobby for a long time will sniff out this behavior in a heartbeat. It's so much easier to just be humble.
You don't have to make your own cosplay to enjoy the convention. If you don't know how to sew and you want to cosplay, go buy your cosplay. It can be at whatever budget you're comfortable with, and if someone says something to you, they are saying that to you because they feel some type of way about themselves, and therefore they're projecting that onto you.
If you come up to a cosplayer and ask them how they made something, don't be all like, oh yeah, well it looks good I guess, I mean, I could probably make it better, you know. Say something along the lines of, thank you so much for telling me that, I really appreciate your time and sharing this with me, I'm really looking forward to getting started on my own. That's how I've always handled that.
For first-time cosplayers, for their first cosplay, it's okay if something breaks. It is absolutely okay. A seam might pop, something might fall off that wasn't glued on properly. It's so hot, your glue's going to melt. Something might get warped. It is okay. There are usually hundreds of people who can help you fix it if it's that meaningful to you, but it is absolutely okay.
What are some of the pros and cons with pre-made cosplays you can buy online? As for the pros, they're cheap. You can order them online on numerous websites and get right to the fun part of socializing at cons. You can also disassemble a pre-made cosplay by seam ripping it, lay those garments down and transpose them onto your own patterns for where you want to remake it out of better materials. But even though pre-made cosplays are cheap and accessible, the incentives for wanting to elevate your skills and make something with your own two hands are numerous. There's the obvious factor of corners are extremely cut when it comes to pre-made cosplays, and so it's always going to look better and you won't have to deal with details being compromised when you're able to bring it to life with your own two hands using better materials and skills that you've learned from experts. But there's also the general comfort level of a pre-made cosplay versus something you made yourself. A lot of pre-made cosplays are made to general sizes. They don't actually really custom make them to your size at all on most websites. So they're kind of like one size fits most, and if you actually make your cosplay with your own two hands and fit it to your exact measurements, it's always going to look better and be more comfortable. Some of the garments and accessories with pre-made cosplays are also not really made with the idea of somebody wearing this for a long time at a convention in mind, and so some of them don't attach in ways that are intuitive or don't stay on or are made of material that is fragile. So when it comes to accessories and props, you can make it out of a more rigid material that's going to actually hold up over time or have a way to attach to the main garment of the cosplay that's actually intuitive and will stay on for a long period of time. When it comes to actually learning the skills, now couldn't be a better time to get into cosplay. The kinds of tutorials that exist nowadays did not exist back when I first got into it. There are wig styling tutorials, sewing tutorials, foam armor making tutorials, painting tutorials, sculpting tutorials. They're all out there. And there are actually officially published books that are cosplay tutorials published by professionals that you can buy a PDF of online. Even a lot of the technology and techniques that exist now didn't always used to exist. Back in the day when I first tried to learn how to make Halo armor, for example, the methods at the time were to take the 3D models from the game and import them into the Pepakura designer software to make a papercraft version of that 3D model, print it out, assemble it, cover it in fiberglass resin and Bondo, which was toxic by the way, and sculpt it down until the desired details had been achieved. It isn't clear who actually invented this technique, but whoever decided to just remove the fold lines from the Pepakura pattern and transpose the pattern directly onto EVA foam was a genius. It was an absolute game changer in armor building. Now all of a sudden we have a material that is lightweight, durable, cheap, easy to work with, non-toxic, and looked good. The fact that sites like Arta Wigs exist, which is a mainstream website where you can buy high-quality wigs in a variety of styles and colors that are actually designed to fit people with large-size heads like mine. Nowadays, we're in an era where 3D printing technology is more consumer accessible than it's ever been before. Now you can either design your own STL file by actually doing the 3D modeling yourself and print it on your own printer. Or you can purchase the rights to an STL file from somebody else who did the hard part for you, and then with their permission, build it off of your own printer. Or some people are just flat out selling the kits for 3D printed parts. So they will do the STL designing and the printing for you, and you're just buying the pieces and you're doing the assembly and the finishing yourself, which is the most time-consuming part, but it does take a lot of the technical work out of the process. I want to talk about some of the socio-cultural elements of cosplay by confronting some stereotypes. Some people may have certain skills that lend themselves better to learning cosplay easier based on what kind of skills they inherited from their parents based on traditional gender norms. So for example, a cis woman may have grown up in a household where her mother or other women in her family have taught her some sewing skills, and so the aspect of making garments for cosplay has become a lot more easy. Or you could have a cis man that grew up in a household where their father taught them a lot of working in the garage with power tools and things like that, and so the aspect of making props is a lot easier for them. These stereotypes can result in us either assuming what types of skills somebody may bring to cosplay, but also what types of skills a person may be interested in learning about cosplay. It should be no secret that cosplay is a hobby dominated primarily by women. But just because a hobby is dominated by a particular demographic does not mean that it is so at the exclusion of others. But, and this is in my opinion where I think women have an advantage here, is they seem to be more willing to pick up the power tools, the sandpaper, and the spray paint than the men are to pick up the sewing machine. This creates a bit of an adversarial relationship where just because a man thinks they can make a set of stormtrooper armor and a really big sword, they think that they are an authority on what makes cosplay challenging and skillful. And I know it's not as easy as how I'm making it sound, but I really wish we could all just push past this. And I encourage anyone to try to learn the skill that they haven't tried and embrace something new, even if it means admitting what you don't know and asking someone for help who knows more. Now, when you get really good at making something, you may feel compelled to sell your skills and make a little bit of money doing it on the side. Commissions are a great way to have something high quality made while you are too busy making something else for yourself for another project, or you simply lack the time or the skills to make it yourself, but you have some free money to throw at someone who does. But there's a plethora of etiquette to consider when it comes to commissions as well. The biggest thing to keep in mind is, of course, the good, fast, cheap paradigm. This is pretty self-explanatory, but it goes a little something like this. Something that is made fast and made cheap is not going to be good. And something that is made good and fast is not going to be cheap. You have to pick two, you can't have all three. Communication on behalf of both parties is the most important thing when it comes to doing commissions. Both parties need to be very transparent with each other out of what is expected out of the other person. Usually when I commission another cosplayer, I provide as many detailed high-resolution reference pictures of what I want made as possible, a strict deadline of what convention I want it done for, which is usually at least 6 to 9 months out from when I'm asking for the commission, and then I make sure to pay them at least half of their price they're asking for up front as a show of good faith so they can spend that money on materials and so they don't have to buy the materials out of pocket. It also kind of builds confidence that they know I'm serious about it. I'm not going to back out at the last minute when I've already sunk a ton of money into it. As the cosplayer offering the commission, you may agree to some different payment plan with your customer, but I think the most important question you need to ask up front is to establish what their budget is. If what you're making is going to cost you around something like $600 to make, and they tell you they're only willing to pay $100, then you can kind of head all that off at the pass and make sure you don't spend a ton of money and time on something that the person clearly has no intention of paying for. They may just not agree to your terms and go commission somebody else, or not at all. It saves you the trouble and nobody has their feelings hurt. As someone doing commissions, do not undervalue your labor either. One of the things that people who don't do cosplay just don't understand is the sheer amount of time that these things can take. And so before you know it, you went from a $120 3D print raw cast commission to now a $500 fully finished piece. And finally, as I said before, communication is just so important here. Like, it's the absolute bare minimum of professionalism for both parties to communicate with each other. If one or either people needs to cancel for any reason, they need to be upfront with that as quickly as possible so that the other person can make arrangements or there's no loss of money or materials or whatever. Please just communicate with these people. Like, it is such a low bar. Alright, so you have your cosplay and you're all up to speed on convention etiquette and generally how these events play out. You're ready to go and you're ready to find a group of people all congregated together, all cosplaying from the same thing you're cosplaying from. So how do you do that? Introducing fan group photo shoots. These events are just part of the emergent culture of conventions. It's not clear when people decided this would be a good idea, but there's a sort of unspoken language with how they're done that's been passed down through the cultural dialect of conventions. This is the realm I love to operate in. I really enjoy attending and hosting group photo shoots, and I've put a lot of thought and effort into what makes them enjoyable and how to run one successfully where they are fun and welcoming for everyone involved. Let's talk about the pros and cons of group photo shoots. For pros, it's a guaranteed way to find other people cosplaying from the same thing you are, and by extension, a great way to socialize and meet people. If you're worried about a particular part of your cosplay that doesn't look quite as good as you were hoping, by putting cosplayers in a lineup next to each other, it can kind of help disguise little flaws by creating a group photo shoot where everybody kind of elevates the quality of each other by being put side by side. Also, group photos can be really rad. It's really cool to see a whole ensemble of characters from the same thing all lined up together, especially in large numbers. As for cons, no pun intended, these events can be chaotic if not run well. Everybody knows that the general quality of a photo taken by a group picture is not going to be anywhere near as good as the quality if you hired a photographer to do a personal photo shoot just for you and your friends. You end up with awkward situations where you're like partially obscured off in the corner of the picture with people half in front of you, or you'll have like a bunch of people looking seriously right at the camera with a cool pose, and the one person is off in the corner T-posing. So some people naturally are just going to prefer to have their photos taken privately, especially if they put a lot of work into a recent cosplay they just finished and they want to make sure they get good pictures of it after putting all that work into it. People who are prone to social anxiety may also have a hard time being put directly in the spotlight and being the center of attention. There's also the factor of you do have exactly one very chaotic hour, and sometimes that's not enough time to actually socialize and communicate with people, especially if there's a lot of people at the photo shoot and you got to get things going and get people out of there so the next photo shoot can come in. In response to some of these negative externalities, and because it's something I'm really passionate about, I've put a lot of care and effort into making sure that the photo shoots that I've hosted over the years have been very well structured and organized. I am a huge advocate for centralized cosplay fan-based social media groups, Facebook groups or Discords that act as a community hub for hosting these events. These are used for these groups to coordinate and plan the next meetup at the next convention in a particular area, and also for the members to socialize and express their passion for that franchise with other people they may actually meet in person at the next event. Managing and maintaining some of these groups has been one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had the pleasure of doing as a fan of cosplay. They've been very successful at cascading information out about a particular meetup, centralized either at a specific convention, a specific region's conventions, or an entire nation. I've collaborated with a lot of other community managers for these types of groups across conventions at the Southeast to at least make sure that these groups, among the ones that exist, have some internal consistency with how they're themed and organized. But a group like this doesn't exist for every franchise, and some franchises are simply too big or too chaotic for one to exist. The other thing to remember is that these are groups created entirely by consensus. There's nothing official or authoritative about making a Facebook group called One Piece Midwest Cosplayers and then starting to host photo shoots and meetups. There's nothing official created by the conventions or the creators of the source material that lends any authority to these groups. It's purely a fan-made thing, and nothing stopping someone else from coming along and submitting another One Piece photo shoot to your Midwest convention, and that's fine. These groups don't exist to create an in-group with exclusivity. They exist so that people who enjoy these franchises can count on a photo shoot being there and can easily access information on when and where they're supposed to be, instead of just counting on some rando to submit one and hopefully it lines up with their schedule. Running these groups and hosting these events, it does come with its own set of challenges though. One thing you have to remember is you cannot simply chase down every single person cosplaying from the thing that you're hosting a photo shoot for and expect all of them to attend. You simply cannot do it. I've been collecting a lot of data on why people do not attend group photo shoots for things that they are cosplaying from, either on purpose or by accident, and I've come up with a couple of different categories here that I've been able to compartmentalize all the answers into. The reasons why somebody would not go to a photo shoot for a franchise that they are cosplaying from can be explained like this. I've narrowed it down to about 4 main reasons why this happens based on the answers people gave me. 1, they simply enjoy cosplaying with their friends more. 2, they simply had a scheduling conflict and otherwise would have attended. 3, that fan base is something that they enjoy, but due to some negative associations, it's a fan base they would rather enjoy in private or in the company of people they only know and trust. And 4, they didn't even know the photo shoot was happening at all or where to locate it at the convention venue. So for point 1, some people simply choose to cosplay alone or with their friends, and that is their choice and it should be respected. It's just best to leave them alone and not try to change their mind. For point 2, as we discussed, there are a lot of things to do at a convention, and a lot of times people have scheduling overlaps where they have to make a compromise. It's actually very common, and it's often that you won't be able to do all of the things that you set out to do when you initially plan out your day at a convention. The only thing about this that kind of gets under my skin a little bit, and this is me being petty, but it's the general unwillingness of people to modify their cosplay lineups to accommodate photo shoot times. Like in my case, I make sure that the photo shoots are submitted as early as possible and as much information is communicated out as early and often as possible, and I pick my lineup based on when the photo shoots are going to be. And it seems that a lot of people pick their lineup first and then just happen to see if photo shoots line up with when they're going to be wearing X thing. Like, if you're not willing to just swap around one of your cosplays to make it to a photo shoot, then going to the photo shoot clearly wasn't all that important to you to begin with. But I recognize I'm being a bit petty here, and ultimately, again, it is people's personal choice, and that should be respected. Disclaimer about point 3. I don't want to generalize or say anything insensitive or derogatory towards anybody who enjoys a particular piece of media for any reason. So don't take anything I'm about to say personally. There are certain fan bases whose cosplay community is made up with a majority of children, a fan base dominated by minors. So a lot of adult fans that enjoy these franchises will avoid these photo shoots because with such an overabundance of minors, things can be chaotic and overwhelming, to say the least, but also as a 30-year-old, you may not want to initiate contact with a 14-year-old because, ew. And so wisely, a lot of older cosplayers avoid these meetups so they don't have to initiate contact with minors, and I think in a lot of instances, that's the right call. And finally, we have point 4, where someone who would otherwise love to attend that photo shoot because they're cosplaying from the same thing that the photo shoot is for, but they didn't show up because they didn't know either that the photo shoot existed at all, when it was, where to find it, or where to find the information that would tell them. I have a burning hatred for this answer, and not directed to any of the individual people who tell me the answer, but based on the conditions that allow this to be the case. My frustration with this answer is I put so much time into making sure that information about photo shoots that I'm hosting is cascaded and available. I will make multiple posts. I will post in the official Facebook group for the cosplay group and in the Discord. I will make an event page for the event at the con. I will post in the con's official Facebook group. The convention itself even makes a spreadsheet with the time, date, and location of all the photo shoots and posts it to their specific website. And I'll go up to people at the convention cosplaying from that thing the photo shoot is for and tell them about the photo shoot. And sometimes they already know about it, and the times they don't, I make sure they have the information they need in order to find it. But what has become unavoidably obvious this year is that social media platforms are becoming very ineffective at delivering information to people. Most conventions have an official Facebook group for the convention. These groups can have tens of thousands of people in them and are incredibly difficult to moderate. Most of the posts in these groups end up being irrelevant spam, memes, people trying to hook up or party it up at the con, or just irrelevant whinging about the con's policies. There is so much unproductive complaining about the convention and the venue, and it's to the point to where everybody is engaging in those posts and they never see the posts I make about these meetups. Not to mention, Facebook as a platform has really become enshittified in the last few years. The ratio between posts that you see that are actually from people you follow and who are not from people you follow and or are ads is ridiculous. Not to mention the plethora of bot accounts infiltrating groups to post spam and hijacking accounts of inactive or in some case deceased members to further propagate spam is absolutely nightmarish. It has resulted in a lot of people just simply not using the platform anymore to the degree that they used to. MetroCon, one of the largest conventions in Florida, had to intentionally deactivate their own Facebook group because they couldn't use it for its intended purpose anymore. It had been so bogged down with spam and bots, and their staff was helpless to do anything about it. Then there's Discord, which is just such a revolutionary platform compared to its predecessors. Compared to Skype or old internet forums, Discord is absolutely incredible with how it's able to consolidate information into easily accessible channels and categorize conversations with the ease of accessibility of an instant messenger. That being said, what tends to happen nowadays is I know I'm being hyperbolic here when I say this, but I literally watch it happen. I'll look over the shoulder of my friends' phones and see them do this, where people will join like 100 different servers and then just mute all of them and never read any of them except for maybe one or two. So trying to get people to join a Discord for your cosplay group or your convention is largely futile because few people will actually use it. So social media just frankly sucks these days, and it isn't doing its job of providing easily accessible information about conventions to people attending. And the frustrating part about it is we don't really know what to do about this aside from to keep trying our best with what we have and make sure these communities are as welcoming and engaging as they possibly can be so people will stick around for the long haul. And while we're complaining about social media, let's keep complaining about it, but at a different capacity. One of the challenges with cosplay is how nowadays we are culturally reinforced to sort of gamify our hobbies. It's not enough to simply enjoy doing something. We have to make a social media presence so we can gain a following and network with other people. Most cosplayers engage in this at least casually by making an Instagram account or a Twitter account just for their cosplay, and they do this for a number of reasons. Firstly, sometimes you don't want your coworkers or your family to see that you're into cosplay and see the stuff that you're making because cringe. They wouldn't understand. But you also want a way to connect with other cosplayers you've met or who are your friends. There are a lot of people who I've met once at a convention and kept up with online for years afterwards. There's also people I've met online before a convention and met them in person at the convention and we're still friends years later. I feel like the casual online onlookers look at people who do this and think that there are these cosplayers who are trying to min-max their social media engagement to become influencers. People that treat this hobby as a completely pragmatic, cold, calculated business endeavor. People whose every decision and every post they make is geared specifically towards engagement and furthering their following. As if they're trying to become top 1%ers like the Mr. Beast of cosplay. I sincerely do not believe that this attracts people to cosplay. I'm sure there are people out there that do think this way, but I think they're few and far between, and you shouldn't concern yourself with it. You definitely should not assume that cosplay is the realm of people who are stuck up, selfish, and wannabe influencers. I talked to a very large number of people to do research for this video, and not a single person said that they cosplay for clout or that they want to be some kind of e-celebrity. Like, once again, I'm sure that there are those people that are out there, but they're not out there ruining this hobby for you. Now, there is a distinct difference between somebody who wants to network with somebody online and gain a few followers and some admiration for their cosplay, and someone who's going around a convention trying to be a wannabe prank YouTuber, shoving a camera in people's faces without their consent, and breaking the property of the convention center. Do not do this. Don't be a wannabe prankster, please. It's unsafe, and it gives the convention a bad name. We could run the risk of having the convention kicked out of the venue. It's just bad. Don't do it, please.
Don't give people ideas that could potentially endanger them or damage their own reputation by trying to copy what you're doing. Because there are a lot of potential dangers with that, and you can poorly influence somebody else if you do something that somebody's like, oh, I can do that too, and then they go out in public and try to film something to be silly, to be an influencer, and then they inevitably get accosted by whoever is owning that property and saying, hey, don't do this or we'll arrest you, things like that.
A friend told me a story that happened literally yesterday at the time of recording this, where she had someone that came up to her cosplaying as Denji from Chainsaw Man, and apparently they wanted to ask her permission to see if they could, like, pretend to hump her leg like a dog for a video, and she correctly refused and said, no thank you, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm glad that they at least asked permission, because not everybody knows this character, but even so, it's like, you would think that that would be like a moment of self-reflection to be like, man, clearly I'm really into some degenerate stuff if that is what I'm willing to ask a stranger to let me do for a video, and you're then going to post yourself doing that to the internet. Like, I just find that so patently ridiculous. However, and this is probably where I run the risk of my own personal attitude towards social media influencing my opinion on this, but in my opinion, if you cosplay because you do want to maximize your engagement online and become some kind of influencer, don't do this. Love yourself. Sometimes when you look at the social media accounts of cosplayers that you follow, you may see them uploading a picture every single day, and it creates this impression like they're at a convention nearly every weekend, when in reality they are intentionally releasing photos in a drip feed to maximize engagement. For most of us, we're lucky to attend 2 or 3 conventions a year, especially if you have to pay to travel. Being able to go to a lot of conventions and to do cosplay really in general is a socioeconomic privilege, and it may require you to have a very well-paying job, or a job that at least allows you lots of vacation time, or perhaps a set schedule with weekends off in order to do it often. So while you're working your tedious day job to accumulate enough money and time off to go to a convention, you're doom scrolling through Instagram every single day, and you see the cosplayers you follow uploading a picture every day, and it creates this really unhealthy feeling of FOMO, and it can really weigh on you if you don't log off and disengage.
I had first created my cosplay Instagram, and I was like really going ham with it, posting really good pictures, doing captions, tagging, because at the time I was looking at social media like Instagram, and I was seeing all these cosplayers that were just constantly posting all the time, and you feel this kind of social pressure to keep up with that. And I thought at the time that that is what I wanted to go for, to like accomplish. Because I was like, yeah, cosplay, one of my favorite things in the world. It would be so cool to make like a following for that. Then the pandemic hit in 2020, and it suddenly became like very apparent that like that is not, it can become toxic really quickly.
And sometimes I will see people online chase these parasocial relationships with people that they follow, sometimes for sincere reasons, like out of a mutual interest of something they both like, or out of a genuine appreciation for their skills and their craft. I see this a lot in content creator spaces as well, where it's this performative social thing that we do online, where it's like it's bad form if you're not leaving comments on the Twitter posts of people you follow just to get them to engage back with you. And while I genuinely believe that it's possible to make some really great friends online, I feel like chasing these parasocial relationships like this with people you honestly don't know and are not likely to meet at a convention, it just sets you up for failure, especially if you have social anxiety. It's easy to create a false expectation of how close you actually are with this person, and you may go to a convention expecting to be able to meet them or spend time with them, or you may plan your entire convention around meeting them or seeing them, and then just be met with disappointment when it doesn't happen.
I can't do the social media aspect because for me personally, it, again, like I said, feels like a job. It feels like I'm checking off thing on a list. Like, yes, do your daily post, do your story. And for some people, it works. For some people, they can have that type of engagement and they can make new friends and reach out to people that way. And for some people, it doesn't work. It feels like a chore, and that is okay. I feel like there's a lot of pressure at times for cosplayers to have Instagrams or to have TikToks or some kind of social media presence, but I don't think it's necessary. It's this whole idea with a parasocial relationship, and I see your face. Parasocial relationships are, to me, and you can use this if you, parasocial relationships to me are unhealthy and can lead to a lot of poor behavior is the nicest thing I'll say. And while I think you can maintain friendships, real friendships through social media, like I have friends on Instagram still that I'll talk to, or people on Facebook that I'll talk to that I don't get to meet in real life all that much. Parasocial relationships are so terrible nowadays, because you get these people who think that they can be best friends with these really popular Instagram influencers, or VTubers, especially right now. I think are like, I've seen a lot of VTubers, or like, people are really crossing lines here and there.
Several years ago, there was a guy that kind of, found our group because he was a big fan of, Type Moon and Fate stuff, and I think he was just really enamored with us and our cosplays, that we were fellow fans of a series he really liked. And so he, took a bunch of pictures with us, added us all on Facebook, and started, hanging out with us throughout that entire con. But the following con, MomoCon, after that, he was like messaging me and some of the other members trying to find us, and I would tell him where we were, and then he would try to find us, and sometimes he couldn't, and he got really upset. He was like, oh, my weekend was ruined, blah blah blah, I don't think I'm going back to this con. I didn't have any fun, I couldn't find my friends. And it wasn't like we were intentionally trying to avoid the guy at all, but it's so hard to coordinate sometimes plans with people, and that's one of the reasons why I like the photo shoots the way we do them. Is, as long as you know a very specific time and place that you're going to be meeting up with people that have the same interest as you, that's like your best shot in being able to see them, because sometimes the event space is so large, there's so many people, and people have conflicting schedules. Sometimes you just can't make it happen, or like, you can't stay in the same place long enough for somebody to find you. So I felt bad, but like, I think he ended up like deleting everybody off of social media, and like, we never saw him again after that. And I'm like, man, you can't just base your whole weekend, all of your fun, off of whether or not you're gonna see one person or a couple of people that are your friends. And I mean, I get really disappointed when I don't see my friends, especially if there's somebody I only get to see every 6 months or every year. But you can't let other people define how you're gonna have fun at an event like this. You gotta be able to find it on your own and make it on your own. If this does happen, you have to remember that these people have their own schedules and their own friends and things that they want to do and people they want to spend time with. Not to mention, they also may be socially awkward, and they may have their guard up initially when they meet you for the first time because of other negative experiences they've had in the past where people didn't respect their boundaries in their personal space. Another way in which I feel like being online sets you up for failure is that online interactions generally suck. And so being online, you're going to experience a lot more awful behavior, such as gatekeeping, elitism, bigotry, and just outright bullying than you would experience in person actually going to a con and interacting with people face to face. Like, I really believe that the majority of time when people talk about drama in the cosplay community, what they're describing is terminally online freak shit that's not indicative of how people actually behave in real life. Now, I say that while recognizing that I am privileged enough to not be subjected to the kinds of bullying or passive bigotry that other groups may experience. But that being said, I think it's still fair to say that if your primary means of interacting with people is on the internet, you're going to get the worst of people more often than not. I guess I can say with some experience because, after all, I make YouTube videos. People's brains fall right out of their asses the moment they get behind a keyboard. But if anyone has ever made you feel anxious because of how your body looks or how your cosplay looks, or if you're convinced that X cosplayer is stuck up and pretentious, or that Y cosplayer is your best friend that you've never met, it might be time to log off and go touch grass. Like, it's honestly just so refreshing to remind yourself how kind and accepting people can be in person. It's truly remarkable, and this also goes for fan-base discourse as well, which is a whole nother rabbit hole I don't intend to get into here. But basically, with any hobby, don't take your interactions with people on the internet as the sole experience for enjoying that hobby.
I think a lot of people, that are looking to get more followers, they get discouraged by maybe not getting the engagement they want, or something they might have worked really hard on. It could have been like a a build or something that they created and they're like really proud of, and it doesn't get a lot of attention, which yeah, it is frustrating. I can see that being a challenging thing, is trying not to get discouraged. Especially when you've worked really hard on a project and you're really proud of what you did. Then again, it's like, well, yeah, what do you want to get out of it? Like you were talking about, being on social media for friends, and I think it's easy to connect with more cosplayers on social media, because it's just easy to find people. It's easy to, follow people and see them at conventions and meet up and things. I think that's a benefit of social media, is being able to connect with more people.
All right, so you've been cosplaying for a while now. You have plenty of cosplays. You've been doing this for a while. You're comfortable with all your friends. You've navigated all these weird social situations. Maybe had a few falling outs. Who knows? But you're really into it. It's like one of your favorite things that you do, and now you want to really elevate your skills to the next level, enter a competition. I mentioned earlier that people cosplay for different reasons. The people who make cosplays to enter into competitions do so because the payoff that they get out of cosplaying is by pushing their crafting skills to the absolute limit and beyond, and the thrill of competing. Participating in a competition and having something you worked really, really hard on up on a stage in front of hundreds of people all cheering and clapping for you can be exhilarating and incredibly rewarding. But adding a competitive element to anything is a perfect recipe for toxicity. Anyone who's ever done anything competitive in the past, whether it be sports or hell, video games, card games, anything in between, knows that once you add a competitive element to it, people will use underhanded tactics to try to min-max their chances of winning. General pettiness and deliberate psychological warfare are things that some people are going to engage in to maximize their chance of winning at the expense of you having a good time. And while I have heard some horror stories of this happening, generally, most of the experiences I've heard from people entering in competitions have been overwhelmingly positive. There's always other variables to consider as well, like biased judges, or just generally trying to convey to the average person the sheer time and skill that goes into a competition piece. I don't personally participate in competitions because allowing myself to cut some corners here and there on cosplay construction means I can actually finish the thing in a decent amount of time. And two, I'm just frankly not that skilled. If I were to want to be a competition cosplayer, it would have to be the only hobby I had. I would have to practice all the time to get skillful enough at doing it. Athletes, for example, train all the time to be competitive at whatever sport they're doing, and they're in remarkably good shape as a result. Even if I wanted to do something like be a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game player, for instance, I would have to practice all the time. I couldn't miss a single tournament, and I would constantly be refining my skills and second-guessing my decision-making in order to really craft that skill. The same goes for cosplay competitions. The difference between the amount of time of somebody who cosplays casually and somebody who cosplays competitively is an order of magnitude difference, and I just am personally not interested in investing that amount of time into doing it. But for those who are, I fully support them, and I think that it's awesome. There's some etiquette to be discussed when it comes to cosplay competitions as well, even for spectators. Have you ever heard somebody get really pissed about the outcome of a sports event? Like,
that coach is so stupid. Why did he make that play that didn't work out instead of the other play that would have worked out 100%?
People do the same thing with cosplay competitions as well. We're like, why did that person win and not that person? Like they're watching an episode of America's Got Talent. We call this armchair judging, where people will make wild assumptions and make some frankly unkind things about people because of the outcome of a competition. They expect the biggest and most boisterous stage presence to win, and don't take into account the fact that what judges are looking for, as I said before, is in the details. Things that are not obvious or easy to convey to the average viewer in the audience. The people in the audience, frankly, cannot see up close to the things that the judges saw, and cosplay competitions are always prejudged, so the judges got to put their hands on the cosplay and evaluate it hours before everybody went on stage. Construction technique, small details, and overall craftsmanship are what matter in a cosplay competition, not which cosplay looks the biggest and coolest on stage.
Not all cosplays are competition cosplays. Even if you sew every seam perfectly Apply every applique without a wrinkle. Have all your lines perfect. Even then, not every cosplay you make is a competition piece, because there's two things that I've noticed that judges super love are it needs to be finely crafted, yes, but it also still needs to have a stage presence. Simple does not mean easy, but you could come in with a simple cosplay that looks not complex at all, but is made extremely well in every regard. But when you get on stage, it just looks like a t-shirt and pants. But it's a really well made t-shirt and pants.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
you want to make sure that your cosplay has a little bit of everything in it, from the sewing to the foam work to leather work to applique to embroidery. The more techniques you put into a cosplay, that's just more and more points that just get added to your score. Yeah, it may be very possible that some of the other cosplays looked great from 30 feet back, but right up onto them, they might have some wavy lines and a missed stitch. So many different things that could offset one thing to another that you just will not see unless you're 3 inches from the person.
Yeah.
Do not walk into that judge's chamber going like, I've got this in the bag, I'm going to win. Just be humble, go in, understand that they're going to visually rip apart your cosplay. Because at the end of the day, they have to compare the work that you've done to the work that so many other people have done. And if you go in with the attitude of, oh, I got this in the bag, they're going to be able to tell. And it's not that they're going to take points off for you having that confidence. Like, go ahead and have the confidence. But they are going to remember that when they see that you have an unfinished seam or you didn't seal your paint correctly on your armor. The other thing going into the judge's chamber, and this was told to me specifically by a judge, don't point out where you've messed up. Don't point out if you're missing something, because if they don't notice it, it doesn't count against you.
Even you can put all your work into a cosplay and still not win, but don't give up. Go to other conventions, go to other contests, enter it again. Do not just stop there. There's many times where I've seen like people make one cosplay, they get into a contest, and then they're like, oh, I'm gonna make another one. And this one didn't work, I'm gonna make another one. Don't do that. Don't do that. Go to other conventions. All the judges are different. They have their own ideas of what every judge have their own opinions. So even though those judges didn't like it, well, even though those judges didn't choose yours, some other judge will probably choose yours.
There are a lot of misconceptions around competitions that simply boil down to people who enter for competition enjoy the hobby for different reasons than people that don't. And again, those decisions are valid and should be respected. It's really disingenuous to refer to somebody who cosplays for competition as an elitist or a snob, when at the end of the day, they're just another nerd like you are. They just enjoy it in a slightly different capacity. One of the things I've struggled with in making this video is that I have so much to say and so much of it is directed at widely different audiences. The problem with making a video like this about etiquette for first-time convention goers is that it's largely futile, as a lot of the advice, as I said before, will fall on deaf ears of the people who actually need to hear it. See the shower and wear deodorant example. People still say that all of the time to the point where you think it would be redundant, but people still show up to these events unclean, even though it gets said so often to the point of absurdity. So in the unlikely chance that one of my target demographics for this video is still watching, I want to speak directly to you guys for a minute. I'm talking, of course, about the boys. The ones that feel like they have a hard time fitting in, or maybe they feel like they have a hard time finding a partner or making friends. The ones that feel like they have a negative association with the cosplay community. I had this friend, and every time I would tell him about a new cosplayer that I met, or somebody that I followed online, I always get the same comments. He would say, that person's an elitist or a gatekeeper, or that person's toxic, or that person's a clout chaser who just wants to be popular. I could tell he was very envious of my large group of friends, particularly how many female friends I had, and then how I didn't seem to have a hard time finding a partner. When I finally told him how I felt about his attitude, he stopped talking to me. I say all this just to say, with all the love in my heart, that if you are somebody who is embittered, jealous, or insecure, and the only thing you associate with girls who cosplay is how toxic and self-centered they are, they're not what needs to change. You are. You are the problem. And I don't say this from atop my high horse. I know what it's like. I have ruined perfectly good friendships by being petty and insecure. It was my fault. But the difference between me and my friend that I just gave the example of is that I had the courage to admit that I needed to grow as a person and get better. Guys, the beautiful thing about cosplay, and I promise I'm not being ableist when I say this, is that you don't have to be good looking. You don't have to be skinny. You don't have to be neurotypical. You don't have to be able-bodied. All you have to do is be a decent person.
There is nothing in the rules about the convention saying that you need to come to this convention and expect to be a certain type of way aside from just being a decent person with common sense.
But if your attitude is sour and you at all subscribe yourself to the incel ideology or ever unironically used terms like cause thought before, you are the problem. You need to fix yourself.
People immediately made it almost like you were fetishizing it. I've also had people fetishize me when I talk about it, which has been extremely gross because they assume if you cosplay one character, you'd cosplay these other characters.
I'm sure, like, in some people's minds, the default reaction they go to when they hear you're a cosplayer is that you're, like, some kind of, like, OnlyFans model or something like that. Right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And I think that's, like, a specifically internet thing where it's, like, people, especially boys that spend a lot of time on the internet, just get this brain poison where they think that any girl that cosplays is a like boudoir model or a nude model because of stuff like that.
It's hard to just be free with what you want to cosplay because you have to prepare yourself for gazes or sexual harassment that you don't want. Yet people seem to think you are like enticing your way on purpose when you're not. And one guy who wasn't a cosplayer, he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, what do you cosplay?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, like at the time I was cosplaying female Robin from Fire Emblem." And I was like, "Yeah, and I like really want to do like these other characters. I really enjoy the Fire Emblem community. It brings me a lot of joy in my life." And he immediately started listing off characters that were more risque.
It stops being about, you know, you picking a character that you want to pick and more so becomes, oh wow, I can't wait to see her wear that so I can see what her body looks like in it, and like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't read comments. Like if there's any pictures of me in cosplay posted anywhere, I don't read the comments anymore.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of nasty ones from one of our photo shoots that were posted on Reddit. And it was just like, you know what? This isn't worth my time.
Also, and this is where I'm going to get explicitly political, and I'm not sorry about this. But if your attitude towards the world has taken you down the path of far-right and bigoted ideologies, there's not a place for you in this community. If you're a nerd who feels like they don't fit into society, then the trans person, the neurodivergent person, the disabled person, they're not your enemy. They're your ally here, and you have a lot more in common with them than you'd like to admit. But if your ideology refuses to allow you to acknowledge those people even exists, or stands to reinforce societal barriers and systemic oppression against said people, we don't want you here. Plain and simple. There is one more demographic of people who I hope is still watching that I want to speak directly to. And it's the person who clicked on this video because they are looking to get into cosplay, but they didn't know where to start, or they have self-esteem issues when it comes to the quality of what they're able to make. And what I want to say to you is, you're not just making cosplay, you're making art. And your art does not have value because of how many people took your picture, or if it wins a competition, or how many Instagram likes it gets. Your art has value solely because you made it. I'm going to plagiarize this video about art from Thought Slime because it was one of the best videos I watched in 2023, and I recommend that everyone go check it out. If you want to make cosplay but you're worried that you will not be good enough, what you need to accept is the reality that you'll never be good enough, because good enough is arbitrary. Success is creating something terrible over and over again until you make something slightly less terrible. Failure is not making anything at all. Whether it's drawings, video essays, or cosplay, making art is the act of continuously putting a piece of yourself out there to be vulnerable and allowing yourself to be embarrassed over and over again. And that takes courage. So if you made your first cosplay and you think it sucks, congratulations, you did everything right. Now keep on doing it and make something else that sucks too. I'll be here cheering you on. But you're already winning in my book.
All of my friends that I've made through cosplay, like, people who understand what you're doing and understand what you've gone through to create what you're doing, those people are the ones who are also going to be just supportive of whatever you do. And those are the people that you want in your life.
I want to articulate this in a way that's not going to, like, make me cry. Because cosplay, it wouldn't be an over-exaggeration to say it did change my life. Through cosplay, I've met so many people. Like, we're talking right now because of cosplay.
Depending on how into character I can get, it kind of helps me identify with the character a bit more, helps me discover some new aspects about myself. It's liberating.
Making friends, I've met so many friends from, cosplaying and going to conventions and being a part of the community, just looking at something being like, I made that or I did that. Just so many things about it, and just makes me happy.